How's everybody doing? So you heard it, my last name is Parti, and it's very easy to remember me, Dr. Parti. And my first, and my web page is also drparty.com, and actually the first name Rajiv stands for being the prince, Raj or Rajiv. So my full name is King of Parties. And you won't believe it, when I was an anesthesiologist, I'm still an anesthesiologist, when I used to go and talk to my patients in the morning and say, hi, my name is Dr. Parti, they won't believe it. I had to show my driver's license, or I had to have the nurse vouch for me that is my name, because they thought I'm going to be giving them laughing gas, morphine, and good stuff. That's why I took this name. So it has been a very fun name to grow up with, but sometimes it has got me in trouble too. I still remember very well, I was working in Lindsay, a very small rural hospital, moonlight, doing extra work, emergency room. At 2 a.m. in the morning, a lady comes with real difficulty breathing, about a 75-year-old, and her son brought her. And the nurse started screaming, party, 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 on the intercom. And the son got so upset, my mom is not able to breathe, and you are saying party, party, party. Because we had to explain to him, the nurse panicked herself. Instead of saying Dr. Party, party, she started saying just party, party. Yeah. So I'm going to be talking to you today about an experience which happened 3 years ago to me, my near-death experience, which changed my life forever. I became a happier, healthier, and more connected to divine person. And how this all folded, I'll let you know in detail, but you need to know my life before the ND so you can see where I transformed. I was born in India, and I was raised in a middle-class family. My father was an air traffic controller in a federal officer, and my mother was an English teacher. And my father was a strict disciplinarian. He believed in the British old saying, spare the rod, spoil the child. And my mother I was very close to her. I was the only son. I always got away with a lot of things. And you'll be surprised to know, me, my mother, and my wife have the same birthday. 11th August, all three of us were, and that's why my father used to kid with my mother, what else do you want for a present? I gave you a son. So I was a very average student until my 10th grade. In my 10th grade, I got into real bad company. I started smoking, I started drinking, and I started playing hooky, watching movies all day long. My parents used to think I've gone to school, and then I got caught one day. And the principal called my father to school. And then when I went home, I had the beating of my life. It was almost abusive. My father used a baseball, we call it cricket bat, like you can assume a baseball bat, and had so many of bruises and marks that I could not go to school for 3 weeks. That was really painful. But in 3 weeks, my father realized what he had done, and that was my last meeting. And he started waking me up at 4 o'clock in the morning and started making coffee or tea for me and making breakfast and made me study. And that was my first transformation, and a switch went on, and I became number 1 and number 2 student in the class. And for years to come, they used to give my example. Look at him, he failed the 10th grade. I had to repeat my 10th grade, and what a bad student he was and where he went. And then I started thinking of becoming something good in my life. I thought of becoming a doctor. And then we had to get the permission from the vice principal. My mother came to ask the vice principal that my son can take biology so that he can become a doctor. I still remember it so well. It was around 3 o'clock. And Mr. Sinha, I remember his name too. And my mom said, my son wants to be a doctor and he wants to take biology. He was so rude to my mother and said, do you think your son is going to become a doctor one day? And he made my mother cry. She was crying so bad. That's the day I resolved, one day I will become a doctor to wipe my mother's tears. That was my beginning of becoming a doctor. And then after my high school, in India, to get into medical school is very difficult. 1 in 100,000 only gets selected at a time. I got selected in 3 medical schools. and then I chose the one which was the best and near my house. Medical school was tough. It was grueling. I remember studying 16 to 18 hours a day routinely. Eating, you have reading something. Going to the bathroom, you're reading something. On the mirror, they were all notes. Different anatomy, different relationships, then biochemistry formulas, so on and so forth. So after finishing my medical school, I became very spiritual that time, and I started reading a lot of spiritual books, Indian. I even read Bible that time. I read the Muslim book Quran, and I just thought of becoming a monk that time. And I ran away from my house and went to a monastery in Himalayas. And then the priest or the main president of the monastery told me, my time is not now. Go back, finish your medical studies. Your time will come. So then to finish more studies, I came to United States of America, a wonderful country. I still remember coming the first day. It was 22nd of October 1982, landed at JFK, and I only had $500 in my pocket. My friend picked me up. We were 4 guys. They were doctors too. We were sharing 1-bedroom apartment because we have to pass certain exams before we can start doing a residency in the United States. So while I was studying for my exams, I supported myself driving a taxi, selling newspapers on New York stands, and also worked as a security guard. And the good part was, when I was driving a taxi, I used to tell them, I'm a doctor, but I'm driving a taxi right now. For sympathy, then I would get a bigger tip. It worked, sympathy. Poor guy is a doctor and he has to drive a taxi. So after that, I passed my exams and started doing residency. I did residency in 2 subjects. First, I started doing residency in pediatrics, and then I switched to anesthesiology. Residency was tough too, we used to work 36 hours straight during my time. You start in the morning at 7 o'clock, and you're not done till evening next day till 7 o'clock. And I don't know how they expected us to be totally functional, how we had people's lives in our hands. And small error in judgment would, especially as an anesthesiologist, the patient won't make it. But that was the routine. And the attitude was of the senior people, oh, we went through it, so you can go through it too. And during my residency, I married a very beautiful girl. And it was a semi-arranged marriage. My mother had selected about 15 girls. I went one time, I didn't like anybody. So then I went again after 6 months. I again had 2 weeks, but my wife was number 5. She could choose also. She could say no too. It was semi-arranged in the sense me and my wife had the final yes or no. It's not that we have to marry that particular person. It was more like putting them together. So I liked my wife. We spoke for literally half an hour, and we said, let's get married. I met her for the first time on 29th January, got engaged to her on 31st January, got married to her on 12th February. And then my mother tells me, as if she is giving me an assignment, school homework or assignment, my son, I want to be a grandmother soon. I said, Mom, and my reply was, Mom, don't worry, I'm working very hard at it. And we had a baby boy exactly 9 months, 9 days later. So after I passed my exams, from starting with $500, I started my residency in anesthesiology. I did it at Vanderbilt University, Nashville, Tennessee, where my second child, my daughter, was born. Then I moved to California because my sister still lives in Fresno, so I wanted to be near, but not that near, because my mother advised me, if you stay very near, then there will be friction between your wife and your sister, sister-in-law, and that friction politics, So it's supposed to be about 2 hours away, something like that. You're near, but not near, That has worked very good. My mom and my wife and my sister have very good relationship, because there's some distance. So my life actually became, an American dream was fulfilled. I built a big house, and then I started driving fancy cars. But the first car I forgot to mention, when I was in New York, my first car was a Dodge Dart, a literally old Dodge Dart, white color. I had only bought it for $250. $250. I still feel that love, the first car, was something unique. I'm sure you guys remember your first car. And afterwards, I bought a Mercedes too. But the joy, the first car which I owned for myself, it was my car driving on the Long Island Expressway. I still remember the first time I drove it on Long Island Expressway. It was a different thrill. So it's not necessarily what car you're driving, but which stage you're driving and with what spirit you're driving. And it's not only car, but you can use it for anything, house, jewelry, or anything. So I started my job as a cardiac means heart anesthesiologist, Bakersfield Heart Hospital, and gradually, because technically I was very good, I became a chief of anesthesia at Bakersfield Heart Hospital. And the money I made gave me enough things to enjoy the luxuries. And I actually call that was my phase of extreme materialism. It was every few years a new different car. Every few years I built about 3 houses in Bakersfield. My last house was a about 10,000 square foot house with a golf course, with a lake. And the house was so huge that we used to use iPhone in the house to communicate, especially with the kids. And I had a movie theater, about 16-seater movie theater, because me and my wife are Bollywood movies fan. And we had decorated in 1920s, 1930s cinema hall with red satin curtains. And we even got a antique popcorn machine from eBay, and to complete the whole atmosphere. So I was caught in this American dream, which I call my runaway American dream. And I even had a Hummer, and it was only giving me 8 miles a gallon, but I did not care because I could afford it that time. I was not environmental friendly that time. And it was always what next, what next. But in between, inside my heart, it was empty. There was hollowness, and I was trying to make up for that by going for material things, which were not fulfilling that. At one time, I used to talk to my friend and say, do I own the house or the house owns me? Because I'm always working for the house. Before I built my last house, I used to work about 40, 50 hours a week. By the time I sold my house, I was working 70 hours a week. And my mortgage was about $15,000 a month. So I had to keep working. Yeah, and so my life was apparently good like this from outside. But then one day in the evening around 4 o'clock, me and my wife were sitting in the backyard just talking generally, like where we have come from, where we started our life, admiring our own house and everything. The phone rang. And the phone rang, it was my urologist on the other line. And he asked me, Rajiv, are you sitting down or standing? I said, I'm standing, but I can sit down. I sat down. He said, I have a good news and I have a bad news. I said, okay, give me both. He gave the bad news is that you have prostate cancer. The good news is that is in the early stages, and with surgery, quote unquote, you'll be cured. I was in a state of shock. I was very angry. Why me? I was that time, I think 52, 53 years old. And I was very frustrated. I felt like as if the earth below my feet had moved, and so was my wife's condition. And next day, after we got over the shock, we went to the urologist's office and looked at different options. Though I was in California, the best surgeon who did these surgeries was in Florida, who did it laparoscopically, without cutting it all open, just through the holes. So I flew in there. The surgery went fine, but it left me with complications. The complications were like I had incontinence, I had chronic pelvic pain, repeat scarring, and for that I was prescribed different medicines and more surgeries. I had about 7 surgeries in 2 years to correct the complications. And then for the pelvic pain, I was prescribed pain medicines, which I used to prescribe to patients, like Oxycontin, Vicodin, and I got dependent upon them. I myself became addicted to them. And all these changes in my life led to depression. At one time, I was on 3 antidepressants. So apparently still my friends thought, life is very good for him, but they didn't know the turmoil going inside. So like my wife tells me, like I tell my wife, oh, look at his life, he's so good and everything. She says, what do you know really what's happening in their life? Don't you realize your own self? For your also life, everybody thinks it is a great life. And then I have a very supportive wife, very caring wife, and I'm thankful for that. So after that, 2 years had passed and my incontinence didn't get better. So we decided to do another procedure at UCLA so I could control myself, bodily functions. So a device was implanted on 14th of December 2010. But 2-3 days, again the surgery went fine. After 2-3 days, I started having fever. And fever, they gave me IV antibiotics, but it was not coming down. And it went higher and higher. So much so it went to 104, 105. On Christmas Eve, I was trembling like a leaf and I was in distress. We called my doctor at UCLA and then he said, come to the hospital immediately. And that was one of the most excruciating drive from Bakersfield to UCLA, about 2 hours drive. My wife was in panic. She was crying and driving and sobbing, and if your husband will be okay because it's such a severe infection, this high fever, it can go into septic shock and then it's hard to, a person does not make it. So when I went to the hospital, they gave me more antibiotics, but as an emergency, they decided to operate on me because infection would not be cured until unless they removed the foreign body which had become a source of infection. So on Christmas Day 2010, they decided to do an emergency surgery. In emergency surgery, they induced general anesthesia. When the general anesthesia was induced, after 5-10 minutes of it, I saw myself floating and looking at my body. I was a man of science, as an anesthesiologist myself. I thought, what happened? Did somebody give me some LSD, or there is actually a drug in anesthesia, ketamine? I thought, why would he use ketamine on me? But that was not the case. And I could see the surgeon cut my body, the infected fluids coming out, I could smell the things and I can hear the conversations. I even heard a joke told by anesthesiologists. That's what a part of a job of an anesthesiologist is, to keep the atmosphere light and everybody laughing, because if the surgeons become very stressed out, everybody gets stressed out. And from there, my consciousness, I would love to say, went to like most of the NDEs you hear, near-death experience, that they went to la place, everything was very hunky-dory, everybody was laughing. But for my case, it went to a place which was, fire was raging, there was a constant thunderstorm, and I soon realized I was in a hellish realm. And there were people who were walking with horns and with crooked teeth, dark entities, and it was painful, excruciatingly painful, and I could hear other souls crying and wailing. My first question to me was, why am I here? What I have done wrong? And then I was given the realization that I had so far led a very selfish life, very uncaring life without compassion. It was always grabbing things, what is there for me. I did not care for the people who were below me. I did not mind stepping on their toes to get ahead. And after I realized that I should have led a different life, somehow the hell part started fading away, and my father showed up. My father had his father by his side, and my father took me by hand towards a tunnel. And when I was going through the tunnel, my father gave me some words of advice. And he said, my son, if you keep your consciousness clean and are truthful to yourself, the divine, the universe will take care of you. And these were the exact same words he said about 20 years ago when he died after a heart surgery complication. These were his last words, but I had forgotten these words. But now these words I remember almost every day, and they have become my guiding light, how to live life. And from there, I had a review of my present life, some of the review I had, why I was brought to hellish realm. And then I also had a review of my past lives. And the past lives were two I remember very distinctly. One was I was a poppy farmer about 200 years ago in Afghanistan. And while farming for poppy, I became myself addicted to the sap there. And other thing I remember was that I was a medieval prince in about mid-centuries, like in 1600, a cruel Indian prince who was whipping the poor farmers and having my soldiers whip them too. But this past life was the same past life I had witnessed about 5 years ago with Dr. Brian Weiss. I had gone to his workshop, I Can Do It Hay House workshop, and there he had done past life regression. And thing is that time I had another complication. I had a wrist pain, chronic wrist pain, lifting a very heavy suitcase. One time we could carry about 70, 90 pounds in a suitcase. Officially allowed was 70 pounds, but going to India at that time, India was not advanced. We used to carry a lot of weight with us. And I injured my ligament here and it was not getting better. I had 3 surgeries for my wrist, but it became chronic pain. I could not work for 6 months. Then after that Brian Weiss workshop, when I saw myself as a cruel prince, I asked for forgiveness from the farmers. This is before my NDE, 5 years before NDE. I asked for forgiveness from those farmers, and then they forgave me, and my wrist pain got better in 2 weeks and I went back to work. That time I did not thought as a coincidence, I did not pay much attention to it, but that was the same life I saw myself again. So in the other realm, past, present and future almost mixed together. They don't have to be totally linear. Otherwise, how in present life I can go to the past life and ask forgiveness and my hand to get better? So I have this big scar from here to here for all the surgeries I had. And then after I had a review of this past lives, also it made sense, my cruel nature, part of it was carrying over to this life. Like I would step down on people's toes, did not have any sympathy, especially for people who were below me in hierarchy, didn't show any respect. Even to the patients, I used to have a pain management practice. I still remember a 70-some-year-old lady came, and she had arthritis, and she wanted to talk to me because her husband was dying of lung cancer. But I, always in a rush, I said, oh, she just needs a prescription. I gave her the prescription and walked out. Until today, after my transformation, I feel sorry for that. I wish I could go back again in this life and say sorry to her, But not, I don't do that now. But that time, why waste time? You spend another 5-10 minutes. And actually, they have done studies. If the doctor spends the same amount of time, say standing or sitting, and holds their hand or touches the patient on the shoulder, they heal much faster. They feel much better. But I'm sure you guys have experienced the doctor hardly has any time, gives the prescription, and walks away. But that changed in me too. Take a sip of water. So after that tunnel, on the other side, there was a bright light. I could not see exactly what it was there. There was a bright light. And my father shepherded me towards that light. And from there, I was welcomed by 2 beings, full of energy, full of vigor. And they telepathically, without saying, they told me they were my guardian angels. They were Raphael and Michael. And then when I did my study on this later on, it made total sense to me, Raphael especially being an angel for healers, and I needed a lot of healing. And also to be a healer myself, being a doctor. And then there was Michael, who was angel, head angel, and who's angel for strength. And they imparted me a lot of knowledge, and they made me understand that different levels of consciousnesses are there. Like ultimate consciousness is totally formless, but at a lower level, there is form. It's, like I have lower level than them, but they were like ethereal bodies, so they have a form too, but not as solid as me. Higher up you go, the consciousness becomes totally formless, becomes pure light. So they guided me towards a light which was like 1,000 suns, and it was very soothing, but it was not hurting the eyes. And there was meadows, red roses of different colors. There was sweet smell to the air, and I could hear a chant. It was not Om, I distinctly remember, it was O-N-G, Ang. And later on I found out that's the primitive form of Om used by people in Kundalini Yoga. Like there's another Yogi Bhajan who popularized it in US, Kundalini Yoga. When I was in the light being presence, it was swirling light, and I was given the instruction, it was talking to me without talking. It was more of a knowing. And then I was told everything will be okay with me. But when I go back, things will have to change. I'll have to give up materialism, and I have to be a healer in true sense. I'll have to give up probably anesthesia too, lead a more spiritual life, and help people with 3 conditions I had suffered myself: cancer, depression, and chronic pain, and 4 things, and addiction. And especially the 3 things was addiction, was I'm not a cancer expert, addiction, depression, and chronic pelvic pain. As an anesthesiologist, I used to practice pain management too. While I was in that presence, in the presence of the light being, that what my future would be, what my dharma is going to be, what is expected of me, in the sky, I read a few words which said, "A Course in Miracles." And that time, I did not know what they meant. I remember very vividly, I had no idea what they meant. And then, while I was in that presence, I woke up in the recovery room with a jolt. And the first feeling I had was to go on, I could not do it, but go on my knees and say, "Thank you for the experience I had." When the anesthesiologist came, I asked him, did he tell this joke? He said he did tell the joke, but he shrugged it off, saying, "Your anesthesia must be light that time that you heard it, because hearing is the first sensation to come back and the last sensation to go under anesthesia." Most important thing was for me, after this incident, things started happening and my life changed, quite a few things automatically. For example, though one side I was so sick, like I was going into sepsis, I was well enough in 72 hours to be discharged home. I had open wounds, but I was okay enough to be discharged home. My addiction to the painkiller, pain medicines was gone overnight. It was surprising to me, it was surprising to my doctor, surprising to my wife. To giving up a narcotic addiction without a rehab is not easy. I'm sure you have friends or families who have gone through that path. My depression got better. That was not overnight because I was on 3 antidepressants. The doctor had to taper the medicines off gradually. And my chronic pain got better too. And within, what I'm saying is things started happening. A person came to my friend, a plastic surgeon, Dr. Shah, came to see me after the surgery when I was home. And he said, "I like your house. I want to buy it." It was not even on sale. I said, after my experience from the other side, I said, "I want to downsize too. I don't want to be working for my house all my life." Then we just struck a deal. I was in the process of refinancing my house. And then he had an account with that bank too. So they let him use my appraisal and for what skirt work, what basic work we had done. And so much so, but he had a house. He wanted to do something with that too, but it was a little modest house. We exchanged our houses. It worked out so smoothly. Since then, it has become for me, allow versus pursue. Previously, my nature was grab, competition, I have to go get ahead and everything. But now, relax, be calm, let the divine, let the universe unfold as itself. Like, you have a flower, you can't force it to open, like the bud, you can force it, but it's not going to be the same flower which opens up naturally. So that thing started happening. And the other thing is, I had a Hummer, I sold my Hummer, and I had a sports Mercedes. My wife had a sports BMW. My wife didn't sell her car, but but I sold my car, and I got a Toyota Camry, a hybrid. So with my friends, I kid around. My life literally and figuratively went from Hummer to hybrid. From 8 miles a gallon, I went to 40 miles a gallon, 36 to 40 miles a gallon, depending on the way I'm driving. So things started happening in my life. I became a healer. I started coaching people in this, and gave up anesthesiology and started learning meditation. I learned an Indian way of healing. I mean, you have heard the word Ayurveda. I went to Chopra Center and learned Ayurveda. And Ayurveda is, some of you may not know it, is a 5,000-year-old ancient Indian way of healing. It's consciousness-based, purely consciousness-based. That's living in harmony with the nature, getting up in time with the sunrise, sleeping by sunset. I know it's not possible, now we have electricity, but as close as possible to that. And to know your basic make up, like they talk about doshas, if you've heard, vata, pitta, kapha and all those things. I passed those exams and I started practicing like that. And so my life really got transformed from that ND experience I had. And I started studying the course myself, but to be honest, it was very hard to read. I didn't have any coach that time. It was hard to make out. And then I learned about Marianne Williamson, her book, A Return to Love. That was much, much easier to read. And then I came across one Robert Perry, and I read his book, Path to Light, and I corresponded with him. And he's such a nice guy. He hooked me up with a coach, a teacher, and now I'm diligently, regularly, every week I have a session with her. And she is a nurse, and you may know her, Kathy Komitz. She is coming for the next month here too. She is in Toronto, and that's how my life started transforming. And my nature changed. That's why my wife has been very supportive. Like, I've become more friends with her, more relationship at the spiritual level. That's why she lets me go wherever I want to go, because I come back even more happier and more better husband. Like, giving an example, one time I just sent her flowers, and for what reason? She said, it's not Valentine's, it's not my birthday, it's not anniversary. I said, for me, as long as I'm married to you, every day is Valentine's Day. And she was thrilled to get those roses. I don't send her every day, but if you do every day, then it loses its charm. And then, one thing, it surprised me. One day, I woke up in the morning and she was sleeping. And in India, when I grew up, it was the girls did arts, very stereotyped. My father was very stereotyped. Girls did arts and real men went for science. They read physics, chemistry, and those things in high school. So my sisters went into arts and I went into science. No literature, I read it. My favorite subjects was physics and maths. If I did poor in English, my father didn't care, as long as I did good in English, maths and physics or biology. So one day when I woke up in the morning, I even wrote a poem. And that surprised me and surprised my wife. Why I'm writing a poem now for her? Just few lines, I'll read it to you. I have her permission to read it, I must say, what is love? Love is when you are there, then the world is there. Nirvana, the ultimate bliss, is there. Love is when standing in the DMV line, a couple has more fun than others have on their honeymoon. Love is like two flavors of ice cream. It came to me, like flavors, you put two different flavors that want to melt together and become one. Love is being together like the smell of the earth when it has been dry and the first rain falls. The smell you feel from the earth, that time, so soothing. Love is being together, time stops and you feel this is it, it's heaven. Love is when holding hands and running on the beach feels like one is one with the universe. And then, love is when you feel that on this journey called life, your soulmate has been found. And then, the last one I wrote, love is when in spite of all these efforts, including those above, you give up and say, you are love personified, I cannot define it. And this shocked me and shocked my daughter, shocked my wife, that I'm writing poems now. And I became a very caring father too. My wife supported me, she believes in NDE, what happened to me was real, but my daughter supports me, she believes in that. But my sons, even before the NDE happened, I have two sons, 25-year-old and 18-year-old, they were agnostic. God exists, God does not exist, it doesn't factor in our life. So you had experience, they didn't have experience, it's up to you. But they liked my nature. My son failed his medical school exam about 3 months after my NDE, the second time. Normally, I was sitting in the kitchen, standing in the kitchen counter. It was around 5 or 6 in the evening, and he came and told me that he failed his exam. And I've already spent so much money on it. like close to $150,000 by that time. Normally, I would have been very mad, very angry, very abusive, not physically. That's the line I drew in my life, that I'm not going to be physically abusive, but verbally, I hate to say I have been abusive in the past. And I would have called in names, put him down. But again, to his surprise and my surprise, I was very calm. I was very relaxed. And we sat down like friends, and we said, what is the best way I can help him? And the best we figured out was that he was in a medical school in Aruba, in a Caribbean medical schools, that I moved with him, and I moved with him for 6 months. And in the evening, I used to help him with his medical school studies. And that time was very good for me to, in the daytime, I would walk by the beach. I love water. It was like clear water and sand, white sand, and it was very soothing to my soul. And since my experience in NDE, I have always felt very close to the water and the waves. Was my knowledge I gained was that we are like waves in the ocean. We are connected to the Supreme Consciousness. We are still separate from it. That was the metaphor I realized, and that's what became, I loved going to the water. But my son did not give me any credit when he passed the exam. He did not give me any credit that time. We came back to the United States on Thanksgiving. I still remember coming out of Los Angeles LAX airport. He, with tears in his eyes, he just gave me one hug and said thank you. That time he did give me credit, because it was Thanksgiving and he had made it that far. And he was, so these nature changed. My driving changed. Like when I had the Hummer, if somebody would cross me, it's like a tank. I used to go behind them. How dare you cross me? I was a bad boy. And like the poor guy will see a tank coming and move away. I used to feel like king of the road that time. But now I'm happy driving my Camry. It's not what car you drive, but how you behave with other people. If somebody cuts me off, they must be in a rush, or I'll listen to that song, be happy, don't worry. That's my motto. So this NDE has really transformed my life, and my journey has been a long one, from cancer to abusive father to NDE, then addiction, and then chronic pain, then depression. And one thing, in the presence of the light being, I was told, my time is now, as I told you, to be a speaker, to be healer, and to help people overcome these addictions. So my thing to you all is, I was in Shreveport, Louisiana, and in Nashville, Tennessee. That's what I'm saying, you all. I picked up from there, you all. Is my time is now. When is your time? Because the magic formula I discovered based on the course and my own experience is very simple. Forgive, love, and heal. And you do not need to have an NDE to make use of this formula. And for me, based on the course, limited study of the course and what I experienced, forgiveness comes first. I was so mad at God. I was so mad at myself. I was so mad at my circumstances. The first thing I had to do was forgive myself, forgive God. And forgiveness is very important, even from a health point of view. And forgiveness is not condoning somebody. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. Forgiveness is not bringing the person back in your life, and you're doing it for your own self, not for anybody else. And forgiveness, there are different ways of doing it, and it's not just a one thing time you say, I forgive you, but it's a process. The whole day has to be forgiveness. And there are the few things which I recommend to my coaching clients. Forgiveness, one way is to change the perspective of a situation. It's not making a false reality, but changing the circumstances, looking with a fresh eye, the same circumstances. For example, for me, for my same circumstances, I came up with two different scenarios. I named them also, two personalities, Poor Rajiv and Lucky Rajiv. Poor Rajiv was one who gave up his anesthesiology career, who sold his big house, who sold his Mercedes, sports Mercedes, and I'm not talking about the one who was, addicted at that time. But Lucky Rajiv is who had a divine encounter, who can now follow his dream, who found his purpose, who found his dharma, lives modestly, is not a hostage to his mortgage. And see, they're the same circumstances, but I have a different perspective on each. So that when I start feeling depressed now, I try to remember the, lucky Rajiv versus poor Rajiv. And then other thing I recommend is writing a letter. Like I wrote a letter to my father. Like I had to forgive him for the abuse I suffered. Like the scars I had. That was not the only beating. I had got quite a few beatings before that. Once I remember losing, it just came to me, losing his pen, a Parker pen. His brother had brought from United States. His brother, a younger brother. And I got a big beating that time too. It was just a pen. I can buy thousands of those pens now. What? So I had to write a letter to my father, but I don't recommend mailing that letter. I recommend them to put it in the fireplace and let it become ashes, so that's behind. I even wrote a letter to God. I was mad at God, to forgive me, or to forgive him and for me to forgive me. And other thing I recommend is a simple ceremony, like especially by the ocean I love doing is you take a piece of rock, put it to your heart and ask for divine help. And so you give all your resentments, all your anger, you transfer to the rock and throw it and walk and don't look back, as if you have. And walking in the water signifies you got baptized, and when you walk out of the water, you are new, totally new, and that is left behind. And other thing I recommend doing it every night. I actually started doing it myself, and it has become a very good practice. Every night before going to sleep, ask for forgiveness for that day. If you have wronged somebody, if you had hurt somebody, betrayed somebody. And the second thing is you ask for any forgiveness that you have harmed yourself. And that forgiveness is, to be honest, the hardest to do is to forgive your own self. And then the third is, if somebody wronged you, somebody betrayed you, somebody was hurtful to you, to forgive them and not to take the baggage with you the next day. And that is very important. And then the next thing comes is love. And love is very important. The pure nature of the being I felt was love. That time I could feel love from all my senses. I could smell love, I could touch love, I could hear love, I could see. Everything was love. And love is very important. Actually, love, medically speaking, is very healing. I was telling her in this morning, Alexandra, that in my practice, patients in the surgery who had, especially the Mexican people, they have large families, and who came to see them, they went home early, much earlier after surgery, because love is healing, it's soothing, and that's all we are made of. And hormones in the body change from love. For example, if one is angry, we have the stress hormones, epinephrine, non-epinephrine, cortisol, which are destructive, go up. And one is in love, they have the oxytocin. When a simple hug, oxytocin, prolactin, DHEA, and serotonin, they go up and they bring joy. That's the value of love. And one kind of love I recommend is seva. Seva is a Sanskrit word which means service with gratitude. Nowadays, words like karma, pandit, chakra, they are Sanskrit words. They have become very mainstream American words. But one word I want to recommend is seva also. The only thing you're looking for that time is being nice to the person, serving them with heart, open heart, with gratitude. The only thing you're asking for return is the opportunity that you got to serve them. Especially, can you imagine if the doctors, lawyers, who themselves consider higher themselves than the clients or patients, had that attitude to the patient, that you're giving me the opportunity to serve you, you're giving me my livelihood, how the world will change. And this is not pity, it is a lifestyle. This is compassion in action, and that again has medical benefits. And so much so, what surprised me, even in modern science, is proving seva is very beneficial, because there's something known as mirror neurons. Mirror neurons is, if you move your arm, the same neurons, about 30% of them will fire in my brain too. And they did a study, because of this mirror neurons, The person who is being served, of course, feels better. The person who is serving feels better. But the third person who is just observing that feels better too. Because you can prove this by the chemistry in the blood, which hormones have gone up, which have gone down. So that's why seva is a very important thing I want to promote as my message, service with gratitude. And the last thing comes healing. And if there's a healing based on this forgive, love and heal and being connection to the divine, the healing takes place at 4 levels, I call it: physical, mental, social and spiritual. At the physical level with this healing, there's less chances of stroke, less chances of heart attack, less chances of diabetes and other like migraine headaches, less chances of other issues like obesity. And then at the mental level, there's less chance of addiction. Life becomes more fulfilling. Life becomes more joy. And like in my own case, though I had everything materialistically, me and my wife is a dentist, we had a 7-figure annual income, but that joy was not there. That fulfillment was not there. Though we have much less income right now, but me and my wife are much happier, much, much happier. At least we can scream at kids now, come down, the dinner is ready. We didn't have to use the intercom like before. But the bad thing is, now me and my wife talk to each other, we have to be careful now, the kids can hear us too. So that was at the mental level, less addiction, less depression and more fulfillment. Then at the social level, like being connected to each other because we all made of the same thing, same joy, love, and we are internally connected. That brings also a lot of satisfaction. It has health benefits. And the last thing I talk about is wellness at the spiritual level. At the spiritual level, for most of the people, is being connected to divine. For me, it is being connected to the divine, being connected to God, whichever way you define. But some people who do not want to believe in God, for them also I recommend to be spiritually well is to be connected with something higher than your own self. It could be nature, it could be prevention of abuse to environment, it could be preventing child pornography or some cause which is higher than your own self. That all brings joy. So that's what my message is: forgive, love and heal. I say forgive easily, love passionately and heal quickly. So my time is now. When is your time? Thank you.
So do we have any questions for Rajiv? Anyone have any questions? Yeah. I'm going to put you on a mic so we can pick it up.
I'm wearing this band. I recently went to that course on miracles conference, where that miracle distribution center, and I love this. I'm entitled to a miracle. So that's why I didn't take it off.
Well, thank you, Rajiv, for sharing your story. It's pretty amazing. Thank you. The question I have for you is, I notice a lot of NDE people come back with some kind of, more sensitivity, more, kind of sometimes they can feel what other people are feeling, or even psychically pick up what they're thinking. Or did you have anything kind of like that come back with you?
For me, only my intuition has become better, and subtle changes have happened in me. For example, I used to watch shows on the TV, like murder shows, crime shows, like Cold Files, Forensic Files, Miami, what was it? Miami. There was a Miami show also I used to watch. Yeah, it's not. But now I sit with my wife. I hardly watch TV, but now I watch food channel with her or travel channel. To answer your question, it has brought me a lot of changes in my life without thinking of them or making it happen. It's happened. But at the psychic powers, I didn't develop any psychic powers. I know what you're thinking. I have more intuition now. I know I have become more dependent upon God. I'm more trusting in God. That's why I love this, especially going to the workbook. I was telling her today that 167, I think it's 167, I love is, I'm entrusted with the gifts of God. I'm entrusted and trusted, I love those things.
Thank you.
You're welcome.